Late night, Iain Lee on talkRadio. We'll get you talking.
It's nice to meet you.
You too.
I'm so relieved because I was quite nervous about meeting you.
Why is that?
Because I bought into how you're perceived in the press.
All right.
I bought that.
He's a loony.
Well, I knew you were. I didn't think you were a loony. I just, in a lot of your interviews, you come across as quite stern. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I tell.
Come a little bit closer to the mic. Sorry, because it's not the best. There we go.
I tell you why that comes across, and if you see my, video cast that I put out on my website and social media every week, you'll see that I don't come across like that.
Yeah.
But you see, what you permanently doing is basically you're going into a defensive mode in a way, because people are always trying to take the piss, and they're always trying to make you look an idiot. So if you like, you're on your guard, and that means you concentrate. Whereas if we have a chat now, we can have a chat, and we don't have to get into that to and fro kind of stuff that means I've got to be on my guard, and my real personality is just put on hold a bit.
And it was interesting because I met you downstairs, and I don't know what I was expecting, but you were nothing like I had conjured up in my head. Do you know what I mean? That kind of you. Look, you're smiling now. You got a naughty smile about you, and I've not seen that before.
Oh, really? Stick around.
I don't want us to be, and I don't want this interview to be one of those where we kind of argue about beliefs and take, and it's not a take the piss. There's no catch or anything. I'm really interested in you, David.
Right.
As a human being, right? And I want to talk. We were talking before we came in here about that interview, the Wogan interview. The 25th anniversary. You were telling me.
Yeah, just passed.
It was 1991. I watched it today. It was really uncomfortable watching. And I probably laughed. At the time, I would have been 18. And I laughed at the time. I was one of those people laughing. Watching it now, 25 years later, as an adult, as a parent, as, different, we're living in a different world. I felt really uncomfortable watching it. Really uncomfortable. It felt mean-spirited. How did it feel for you when you were sat there?
Well, it was mean-spirited, but you see, people have a real problem when something is happening that's so different to what they're used to.
Yeah.
And often they'll just ridicule it almost as a defense mechanism, like, what's going on? What's happened to this bloke? And some just ridicule because that's who they are. But you see, I see it in a totally different light. We haven't got time now because it would take a long time to explain, but there was a sequence of events that happened in my life which basically blew my head off. And for about 3 months, I didn't know what day it was, what planet I was on, or where I was. And that's when the Wogan show happened.
Did you say that you'd had a breakdown?
No, I had a breakthrough.
Right, okay.
If you imagine, you like most people, you live your life in a bubble of reality, and you have certain senses of normal, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, someone come along and burst that bubble. And suddenly, everything you perceive to be normal and real went into a state of flux and transformation. And it's like information, concepts, insights were pouring into my conscious mind. And I've described it as like, when you press too many keys on a computer and it can't process the information, it freezes. So basically, that was me for 3 months. It was almost exactly 3 months. And in the middle was the Wogan show. And it wasn't quite, wake up one morning, but it was close to it. The computer unfroze, if you like.
And you turned it off and on again.
And then people were saying to me, who knew me, they're saying, Dave, I thought you'd gone mad. You're the same bloke I used to know. I was outwardly.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in the way I saw the world. I saw the world completely different. I saw things that I didn't see before. And that's what set me on this journey of uncovering information, the nature of reality, the nature of how the world's manipulated by forces that are not the ones we see.
The stuff you said in the interview as well, it wasn't that far, it wasn't that crazy. I mean, there are a couple of things that it could be argued you're wrong. You said that Saddam Hussein was dead when potentially he wasn't. You may disagree with that. But I was watching it, and it's a 16-minute long interview. It's quite a long interview. And, what you were saying about the number of kids that die every minute from diseases that are curable, does that sound like a world that's being run in a positive?
No, the world's a madhouse. I mean, it is. These kind of pennies started to drop. I started to see the world in a completely different way, and I realised it was a complete madhouse, completely bonkers. But if you're brought up in a madhouse, a crazy place, and all you've ever known is the crazy place. The crazy is your perception of normal. And what happened to me when I morphed out of the frozen mode, if you like, is I could see the world for what it was, completely bonkers and upside down and inverted. But because it's what people have known all their lives, it's normal. If you look through history, people who have been ahead of their time because they've seen beyond the normal of the moment of the time, they're the ones that have been ridiculed, dismissed, burned at the stake.
Well, you mentioned the people saying that the world was round.
Yeah.
People would laugh at them as lunatics.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, just a quick throwaway line for what it's worth. A few weeks after I said that about Saddam Hussein, the Sunday Times ran a front page exclusive about all the Saddam Hussein lookalikes.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
And when Saddam Hussein is supposed to have swum across the river to show he was fit and alive, that actually was a lookalike, according to the Sunday Times. So, the thing is that the world is so not like we think it is, both in the nature of the reality we think we're experiencing, and also in the nature of geopolitical events, that it's much better to hold your fire and not be too dogmatic on this is how it is, because history shows that almost every time that this is how it is of the moment turns out to be that this is how it's something else a bit further down the line.
You mentioned an interesting thing. There was a second interview with Wogan, wasn't there? A few
That's
years
right,
later,
yeah.
where they kind of looked
That's
back
right, yeah.
on that. And I watched that as well. And you mentioned something that actually we've kind of been discussing on the show from time to time. It may have been when I can't remember exactly what the context was, but you said people are more interested in who shot Phil Mitchell than what's going on in the real world. And I'm starting to notice that the newspapers are full of X Factor and Kim Kardashian, and not looking at. Journalists aren't finding out stories. The VIP paedophile ring, well, that seems to have gone away because there's a new series of X Factor. And
of course, we've had an update on that today with Clement Freud.
Isn't that incredible? Yes.
You see, back in the mid 90s, I started coming across people who were telling me about this Westminster paedophile ring. I talked to a lady who had worked for the intelligence services, who was telling me about the paedophile ring in North Wales, right? I actually met her up in Anglesey, actually. And the information was gathering and gathering and gathering. And I actually named Ted Heath in a book called The Biggest Secret in 1998 and others. And, of course, it was so much later, after the ITV documentary on Savile, that bingo, the bubble burst. And what's happened...
Well, did it? It's not quite burst, though. I think that bubble still kind of...
Yeah, well, this is the point I was just going to make. What's happened is that there was basically a lot of information came out very, very quickly after that Savile documentary and all the other names that came out. And then you could see, I mean, I was watching it and I was saying on my website, this is what's going to happen. You could see the response to that building, and suddenly certain people in the media and certain newspapers were trashing it, the idea of a Westminster paedophile ring, and they were throwing it in the long grass with inquiries that weren't going to report for years, which is the classic way of throwing it away. But it won't go away, and I'll tell you why it won't go away. If people think what's come out so far is massive, well, strap in, because it is colossal, and more will come out, and it will come down in the end, because there is a Westminster paedophile ring, and not only was it operating during the Thatcher administration, it's operating now. And it will come out, but they're desperately trying to stop it doing so.
Do you ever, David? Do you ever feel like you're pissing in the wind? Do you know what I mean? That you're saying this stuff, and you get big audiences, huge audiences, and huge numbers of people buy the book. But there are still a significant number of people who think, "Oh, he's nuts." Oh, I used to like him when he was doing the football and the snooker. And do you know what I mean? And that you're not being taken as seriously as perhaps you would like to by a large group of people.
The thing is, that's not my problem. That's their problem. And I'll tell you something. When I started out 26 years ago now, 25 since the Wogan show, I couldn't fill a phone box. I mean, if I couldn't walk down any street in Britain without being laughed at by person after person. Going into a pub or a bar, forget it. There was uproar. I remember speaking once, because, I must be crazy, because at the height of that, I went on a speaking tour of student unions.
I went to one of those shows.
Did you?
I was there, yeah.
Yeah. And I went to one in Nottingham, and I walked out, and it was uproar, and plastic beer glasses were coming on the stage and stuff like that, and I went out there and I couldn't speak for a while because there was so much noise, and I let it die down, and then I said, "You think I'm mad, don't you? You think I'm insane? Yeah, whoa," all that stuff, and I let it die down again. And I said, "So what does that say about you? Because you're paying to ridicule a man you think is mentally ill, right?" And there was silence. But what that gave me was enormous strength to speak my truth, no matter what the situation was. But going on to the point that you brought up, in those days, trying to get anyone to look at any of this stuff in any serious way was virtually impossible. There's this alternative media that's built up through the internet. Didn't exist then. I had to go around Australia in the back of a little car, not flights, back of a little car all over Australia, speaking to people. I went across America, speaking to people like 8 people and stuff like that to start with. And you build it up, and gradually you start to make an impact. And I noticed a big increase in interest after 9/11, and a big increase after weapons of mass destruction weren't found in Iraq. And so I can see where you're coming from when you say there's so many people that are not listening. But I tell you what, I'm in frickin' dreamland compared with 25, 26 years ago. And I've seen the not just in Britain, but globally, the number of people who are opening their minds to things and concepts and information they would have dismissed by reflex action before. There is an awakening going on. Is it the majority? Is it as many as we would like? And when I say an awakening, I mean an awakening to question things you haven't questioned before. We take so much on face value. If there's one disease that is taking humanity's freedom away more powerfully than almost any other, it is naivety. People say things as truisms. Everyone knows that. But then they ignore the fact that it's true. Like they'll say, "You never believe what the politicians say," but they do. And then you never believe what you read in the newspapers, but they do.
Yeah. Not me. I don't believe what's in the newspaper. I can tell what's made up and what's not. Everyone says that.
Yeah.
I'm more intelligent than everyone else. They won't trick me. But we do. We read the newspapers and we take it at face value.
Yeah, it's this naivety. And if there's a bottom line of what I'm saying, it is, please think for yourself. It's like this this EU referendum. Instead of saying, well, what are the leave camp politicians saying and what are the stay in camp politicians saying before I make my mind up, do your own research.
Yeah.
Do your own research.
I want to go back to the Wogan interview. I read afterwards that your life was miserable afterwards, that your kids were being people were taking pictures of them and turning up at their school. Is that right?
Yeah, of course. That's what you get when you do things like that. But you see,
that must have been awful.
Well, it was awful. But I have this phrase. Life often gives you your greatest gifts, brilliantly disguised as your worst nightmare. I went through historic levels of ridicule, and it cleared me out of the prison that most people live in, which is the fear of what other people think. Most people are not living their lives as they wish to live them, are not speaking their truth as they would like to speak it, because they are in fear of what other people will say, whether it's their parents, whether it's the people at work, whatever. And so instead of living their life and their truth and their uniqueness, they're living someone else's version of what they should be. That mass ridicule cleared me out of that. And now I have a family, a daughter, my two sons, and, Gareth is a singer-songwriter. He'll be playing at the event at Brixton on Saturday. And they are rounded, confident people who have taken the gift of what they went through, and it's made them stronger, and it's made them bigger people. And everyone, my family went through it and came out stronger, bigger people, which they wouldn't have been without it.
When it was happening to your kids, though, did you not think, because I'm a dad, I've got two little boys, did you not think, oh man, I should not have brought this? I'm responsible for what's happening to my kids.
Well, yeah, of course.
Maybe I should shut up.
Of course you think that, but you can't judge a journey by every step. You've got to see where the journey leads. And often you don't know where the journey's leading until you bloody get there. And as the years have passed, my family, certainly myself, have seen the benefits of going through that those challenges, and they were seriously extreme, and coming out the people we are, not despite them, but because of them. And if people listening to this, a lot of people will, as they say, resonate with that, because they will look back at great experiences and challenges that they had, and they will see with hindsight the benefits that they got from it. So I look back at those times and that period of immense ridicule, not quite with affection, but not far off, right. because it's made me the person I am, and I am delighted to be who I am. So it was a gift, although in the experiencing of it, it was a bit of a nightmare.
Do you think part of if I got this right as well, a lot of the ridicule was based on a misrepresentation of what you said? Have I got this right? You never said you were the son of God. You said you were the son of a Godhead.
Well, we're going back to what I said earlier. In that 3-month period, I didn't know where I was,
right?
Because of what was happening to me. But
your dad had just died as well, hadn't he?
Well, yeah, about a year before.
Okay.
But what I'm saying now is in a way the same. When you look at reality, and it's just extraordinary how people are systematically kept from understanding the nature of reality we're experiencing. I'll give you an example. According to mainstream science, of what exists in this universe in mass and matter energy, the electromagnetic spectrum is only 0.005% of that. That's all. the only frequency band that we can see, the world we perceive, is a fraction of that 0.005% called visible light. Everything else outside of that, the virtual entirety of the universe, is invisible to us because we can't decode it into a visual reality. Another thing, if you take the Earth's size in comparison with the size of the universe as mainstream science perceives it, the Earth is the equivalent of 1/1000th of a pinhead. So when you bring reality down to that, the idea that from that desperately laughable tiny frequency range on that laughably tiny planet by comparison with the universe, that we can just dismiss things, that can't be happening, that can't be happening, that can't be happening, is confirmation of the scale of perception programming that goes on. And when you look at quantum physics and all these other areas that are delving into the deep levels of reality, everything is an expression of everything else. It's like an ocean. If you imagine an ocean and you've got the white, tops of the waves, they look different to the ocean, but they're still part of the ocean. And so you have a name and I have a name. And we have a life story and we have a kind of human self-identity. But you are an expression of the same infinite sea of energy consciousness as I am. Thus, if you want to use the name, I don't, for this infinite field of consciousness, quote, God, then you are an expression of that. And I'm an expression of that. So we're all expressions of that. And this is something that has been talked about in ancient cultures all over the world through shamans and people like that. And now quantum physics is starting to increasingly confirm that that's the case. And if we only realized that we're all expressions of the same one consciousness, we might or we might find the good sense not to kick the crap out of each other, both verbally and literally, as we do in all these vehicles for dividing and ruling us, all these wars, all these conflicts, all these patterns of violence. We've lost an understanding of who we are. So I'm describing it in these terms now. What came out on the Wogan show was I'm basically son of God. I'm an expression of God, if you like. But it's not a wording that I would use now. Do
you think part of the reaction to your transformation is because we were talking about sport when you came out? I'm not a sports fan, but I was really interested that you're still a fan of sport. I'm picking up from the little chap we had earlier on.
Am
I in trouble?
Have been supporting Leicester City since the 1950s, man. 1950s. I used to go to Filbert Street. I learned to be a goalkeeper by watching Gordon Banks in the early 1960s. So, I've seriously been interested in sport this season, I'll tell you.
It's interesting. Let me go back a bit, because you talk about the transformation and the gift you got after being on the Wogan show and the public humiliation that was there. And I want to apologise, because I was one of the people at home laughing.
It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter.
Thank you. But you'd had other big, maybe not quite as big, but other big setbacks and transformations before. The football career brought short because of the arthritis.
That's right.
And that kind of reset what you were and what you had to do. And is that when you went into TV presenting?
Yeah, you see, when I look back at my life, and I think a very large number of people listening to this programme will be able to see that in their own lives. We see things as random happenings, but when you look back, you can see patterns of what has happened to you and where it's led you as a result of what has happened to you. And so when I started going out on this, if you like, journey of research and uncovering all this stuff, I basically, my life before that had given me everything I needed to do it. One, when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was be a footballer. I became a footballer, and then the arthritis started. And the arthritis started when I was 15 and a half. And I played my entire football career till the age of 21, when I couldn't do it anymore, with gathering arthritis.
Wow.
And when I played for Hereford United in the last 2 years, every morning going training was agony.
Really?
Till the joints were warmed up.
Yeah.
But I couldn't say anything to anybody, because if the club realised what was going on, then they'd have got another goalkeeper.
So
but
you kept that to yourself?
Yeah, but I was with my family, of course. But I was playing well in the games. The adrenaline got me through them, and so when you go through an experience like that, and then you have your dream just trashed because you can't play anymore. It's a bit like another version of the Wogan Show. You either go under and you feel sorry for yourself, or you get up and get on with it. And what then happened is, when I was a kid, I was very interested in journalism. I was always reading the papers, and so when my football career ended, I thought journalism. So I went into journalism, and I started on a newspaper called the Leicester Advertiser, which was just about read by the people that wrote it. Because I had no qualifications. I left school at 15 to be a footballer. So when they said, what degree, what university did you go to? I was like, well, I was on loan for 3 months at Oxford United. Does that work? Actually, when Ron Atkinson was club captain, funnily enough, that's how old I am. And anyway, so I went into journalism, and that taught me a lot about the media, and it taught me to write in a way that you could take apparently complex things and put them in simple language.
Yeah. So
that was a great gift that had given me. Then I went into radio, like talk radio
were you
here.
at? What station were you at?
BRMB
in Birmingham,
yeah. I'll never forget. Used to park your car across. It was in the. You remember the Golden Shot? You're too young.
I've heard
Bob
tell
Monkhouse.
of it. Yes, my grandparents.
Well,
told me about
it came from the ATV building in Birmingham, which BRMB took over, and there was a car park across the road. Actually, it was just a wasteland. And used to come in, and there was the HP Sauce Factory, and there was the Ansell's Brewery, and that combination, especially if you had a few the previous night, was a nightmare walking across that car park. But so I went into radio, and then I went into the BBC in Birmingham regional, and then onto Newsnight, and then onto the BBC sports department. Which gave me a media profile. So when I came out with what I did, it wasn't going to be ignored. And of course, during that period, I also became a national spokesman for the Green Party, which allowed me to see politics from the inside. So all these things that I'd done in my life up to the point where my head blew off were absolutely essential background for what I've done ever since. And so I see my life as is in its entirety, not as a series of random
I've got a brilliant
happenings.
quote from you. I used to work in TV. Every now and then I do. But you've got a brilliant quote for you about TV workers. They're insincere, shallow, and vicious, with rare exceptions. Yeah, I'd go along with that. It's a cold place, TV, isn't it?
Well,
it really
they
is.
used to say when I was at the BBC, they get so confused at the BBC, they stab each other in the chest. You know what I mean? It's unbelievable, and it's like politics. When I've been to Westminster over the years, and when I look at that and look at the BBC, these institutions are looking inward; they're not looking outward.
Yeah.
That's why they're so irrelevant to the general population, overwhelmingly.
The John Ronson interview. That was, how long ago was that? 15 years?
When would that be? About 2001, 2002.
Yeah, 15 years ago. It's on YouTube. Again, I watched it when we were trying to get you on the show. How do you feel about that? John followed you around for a while. And
in Canada, yeah.
Yeah, how do you feel about
Well, that was one of the big jumps, the big leaps in interest at what I did. So I'm very glad I did it. Because, when you're trying to get information out that won't normally get out there, you just have to take opportunities to get it into the public arena, and you're going to be ridiculed, you're going to be laughed at, you're going to be dismissed, but each time you do it, there are people watching who can see beyond it, and they get interested, and then you do it again, and you get more ridicule and more abuse, but people watching, there are a number of people watching that can see beyond it, and they get interested in what you're doing, and basically you're building and building and building it up. So when I'm going around the world now, and I'm talking in Romania, I mentioned before, in November, 2,000 tickets have gone for that already. I've never been in the country. And I'm going to Australia, I'm talking at Brixton in London on Saturday. I'm going across America and all over Europe, doing in many countries simultaneous translated talks.
You're still doing 9-hour-long talks?
Yeah.
Oh man, come on.
Because
come on, David.
No. Think this is an important point. We were talking before about how I was at the BBC when I saw the substance interview and the substance report disappearing.
Yeah.
And
by that you mean people would be on a show and they would talk 15, 20, 30 minutes.
You've got time to get information across, because so often something only makes sense when the backstory goes before it. Without the backstory, just the headline, it can sound ludicrous. Give it the backstory and I see what you meant now. That basically disappeared. I saw it come in from America. It was called soundbite journalism then, because it was so short. And what I'm doing, see, we could have a chat, and if I was someone else who was basically relating to the system as it is, and we could have a short interview, and I could get things across, and people would understand what I was saying, because it's against the backdrop of everything they consider to be normal. So it fits. They don't need a backstory. What I'm doing is questioning and rewriting the whole entirety of normal, everything from geopolitical events to the nature of reality, all of it. And therefore, you have to start at A, and you have to build it through to Z, and you have to do it in a way where the next thing you introduce makes sense because of what's gone before. And that's why the talks are so long. I mean, I don't talk for 10 hours non-stop. There are breaks. There are breaks.
Oh, good. You let them go for a wee and stuff.
I do 4 sections.
Right.
And by the end, I mean, I talked on the Isle of Wight 2 weeks ago at the Medina Theatre, a kind of a warm-up because I didn't know. I had Libet, you see, so I didn't know how long it was going to be. I could have been there at breakfast, so I had to do it once to see how the length was panning out. And there are 1,600 images and illustrations and everything that goes with it. And there were people there who came purely out of curiosity because my family knew them. And you start with the world as it is, and then you go deeper and deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole. And because of the way it's put together, by the end of the day, you're so far in the rabbit hole that if you'd started with that, people are gone, this guy's crazy, I'm out of here. But because of what's gone before, they say, I see it now, I see what you mean. And so that's why I have to talk for so long.
Listen, we run out of time now. One of the beauties of doing this show at night is that we can play this whole interview.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And it gives you a lot of time to breathe and kind of have, I think, slightly more interesting conversations. One final quick question. You said that you walked from your hotel most of the way here today. I just wondered if you got much of a reaction when you walk down the street, what people say.
That is such a good question given my experience. What has happened 25 years on is that people are stopping me in the street to talk to me about what I'm doing in a serious, interested way. I started out in Holland Park Road. I got like 5 minutes up the road, and there's a delivery guy, courier guy on his motorbike, went past, turned in front of me to go past me, stops his bike, gets his helmet off, and walked a mile up the road with me, talking about the information. Wow. He then turned and went back for his bike, and a builder came across. And then I'm going into the park, and this group of people from Slovakia came over, right? And then I was getting in a cab because I was knackered by then to get here. And as I was getting in the cab, there's this young lad who came up, talking about it, right?
Yeah.
So what has happened in this quarter of a century has been in so many ways a transformation of the way so many people see me, because not least now they're actually taking the trouble to find out what I'm saying. But it is also, and I've seen this so clearly, I've almost been a barometer of it, it is also an expression of the fact that more and more people are now prepared to look outside the box to see if there's more to know than the box, or the postage stamp as I call it, is telling them. I've got news for them. Almost everything you need to know is outside the postage stamp, is outside the box. And people are starting to realise that. And it's great for me. I mean, given what I've been through, it is dreamland for me. My life is so easy now compared with what it was before. Coping with the interest is the challenge rather than coping with the abuse.
The website, give the website a plug if people want to go and have
DavidIcke.com.
DavidIcke.com.
You'll find everything there.
Brixton on Saturday.
And I've just got a new book out called Phantom Self. And Phantom Self relates to the self-identity of name, income bracket, family history, which is not who we are. We are infinite awareness, a state of being aware. What we call our name, our life story, etc., our self-identity, human self-identity, is the experience that infinite awareness is currently having. And once you fall into the human self-identity as being who you are, you're immediately into limitation. Everything you look at is I can't, it can't happen, that's impossible. When you get to the self-identity of I am infinite awareness, having that experience, everything becomes possible. And that's what's transformed my life, and is transforming more and more people as they begin to realize that they're far more than the system has told them they are.
So nice to meet you.
Great.
You're taller than I imagined as well. That's
all right.
And I'm glad that you get that reaction when you walk down the street now, because that must have been horrible. Thank you, David.
Different world. Real pleasure. Thank you very much.
The radio show for people who know the best part of the day is the night.
Late Night Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.